Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. I am very excited about this video because I have read another Roger Zelazny that absolutely blew my mind. This story was incredible, and it is called For a Breath I Tarry. This is a 1966 novelette that was nominated for the Hugo for Best Novelette in 1967. It lost to another book that I've done on this channel, which is Jack Vance's The Last Castle, also considered a novelette, apparently. I don't know what the criteria is for a novella to a novelette. I know that it's short story, novelette, novella, novel, but I don't know exactly if that's word count or page count, or how they decide what equals a novelette and what equals a novella. If I were to rate these two stories, Last Castle versus For a Breath I Tarry by Roger Zelazny, I would choose For a Breath I Tarry easily. This was a lot of fun, but the Zelazny story has completely blown my mind. Really, really good stuff. Okay, before I get into anything else, let me give you a quick synopsis of this story. This takes place in a post-apocalyptic future where mankind has been completely destroyed. There's no humanity left. But the machines that humans made to see to their convenience still exist. And there's one machine that is a satellite up in the sky, and another that is a backup system for the satellite under the ground that has kicked in, and they're arguing over who should work with the rebuilding of cities on the surface. And there is a computer, a cube, that is able to change its shape, and it is called Frost. And Frost is really well made, really technologically advanced, and is able to do most of his work with just a few hours a day, but he answers to the satellite machine in the sky that oversees everything, and that satellite asks him to be running continuously at 100%, that it needs to constantly be working, but it can do everything it needs to in a few hours, so it has time to develop a hobby. And the hobby that it develops is looking for old artifacts that humankind left behind. And he starts to study humans, and he becomes obsessed with humans. And the satellite in the sky and the backup system underground have an argument about whether or not the satellite in the sky should be the one in charge or the one underground should be in charge. They start sabotaging each other's work, and eventually they decide to have a contest to see who is the one that should be ruling and leading. So they go to Frost, and they decide to use Frost as a way to fight over who should be the rightful leader of Earth and the rebuilding of Earth. I bet you've already caught the analogy. Roger Zelazny is retelling myths from the Bible, and he does an incredible job of it. We see the concept of Cain and Abel in this story. We see the concept of the creation in this story. We see Job in this story, and we also see Adam and Eve in this story, and it is done incredibly well. And what happens from there is honestly really exciting and really well done, and epic in proportions. I highly recommend this story. If you're looking for a quick read, just want a good science fiction fix that will guarantee to give you the punch of the epic that a lot of science fiction readers, I think, look for, this one will really, really itch that spot. It's incredible. It really is. So if you're wondering if I recommend this story, I absolutely do. All right, let's take a minute to get into the publication of this story. So this was written pretty early in Zelazny's career, right about the time that he was starting to transition from short stories in magazines or novellas in magazines to novels. He Who Shapes had already come out when this was first released in a magazine. So he was right in between This Immortal and The Dream Master and doing all that. But this short story came out in the midst of all that. And it first came out in New Worlds in March of 1966. Of course, this is the magazine that Moorcock edited, and a lot of people look at as kind of the true beginning of science fiction new wave. And Roger Zelazny is absolutely a new wave writer. So it makes sense that he would be in this magazine. So it first saw publication over in England, and then it came out in Fantastic magazine, September 1966. This was its first American release. After this, it really didn't see publication for a while in anything that was like a Roger Zelazny collection. Instead, it found itself published in anthologies over and over again. Best of Science Fiction 1967, and on through these different anthologies until it was part of his short story collection, The Last Defender of Camelot. That's where it finally found its home. Now, I happen to have it in a very unique anthology. This is called A Very Large Array of New Mexico Science Fiction and Fantasy. And, of course, I am in New Mexico, and we have quite a few science fiction writers that we claim as our own, and one of those is Roger Zelazny. He spent the last years of his life here in New Mexico in Santa Fe. He was good friends with George R.R. Martin, who we also claim as our own. And this is a really cool anthology that was put together of all New Mexico writers. And what I love about this is that it is signed by almost the entirety of everybody that has a story, or the editors, or so on and so forth, including the big ones are Fred Saberhagen over here, and then Roger Zelazny here. Yeah, I think those are the main big ones. That one will be a little harder to track down, of course, but you can also find it, and perhaps the easiest, in my opinion, is in the best of Roger Zelazny, the new SF Masterworks version. This is, in my opinion, a really great collection of Roger Zelazny's work. Really good choices were made, including all of the early novels, well, a couple of the early novels in novella form before his editor asked him to expand them, which Roger Zelazny has stated for two of these at least, The Dream Master and Damnation Alley, that Roger Zelazny actually prefers the novella versions and not the expanded versions. So, if you don't have this collection and you're wanting to jump into Zelazny, this is a great place to start. Wonderful, wonderful book. And includes this, which in my opinion is the best Zelazny story I've read so far. I like this better than A Rose for Ecclesiastes. Honestly, I really think that this story blows them all out of the water. What I've found for Roger Zelazny is he works best when he is inspired by some other piece of art to try to interpret it in a science fiction manner. We see this with He Who Shapes or The Dream Master, where he is, in a sense, retelling The Lady of Shalott, but also Tristan and Isolde. And then we see him get obsessed with this concept, really truly, with This Immortal, and then Lord of Light, and then two others after that, Egyptian and another one. He tells these mythic stories over and over again, but puts them in a science fiction universe, which, as I've read through his novels, has gotten repetitive to me. I feel like I'm watching him slowly go over to fantasy writing, which is fine. I like fantasy writing, but I'm very sad to lose the kind of Zelazny work that I saw in this story. The real hard idea driven science fiction that just blows your mind when you read it, which is exactly what I look for this channel. And this story is the epitome of that. And this one, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is all these kind of science fiction retelling of biblical myths, which is really, really well done. You get the satellite that's up in the heavens. Let me give you the names of these. You get Solcom, which is the satellite up in heaven. Then you get Divcom, which is the underground satellite that becomes Satan. And this is really interesting because the way that it works is humanity made Solcom to run all the machines on Earth. But they buried this backup system that they called Divcom that was there just in case Solcom was damaged. Divcom could take over. And what happened is, after humanity has died, Solcom randomly gets hit with this missile that was just kind of left out in space that was orbiting around, and Divcom turns on, but Solcom wasn't damaged badly enough to need the backup unit to take over. So they had this philosophical difference in this one question, right? Was Divcom supposed to turn on and take over when Solcom was damaged? Or was he only supposed to turn on when Solcom was damaged beyond the ability to continue to do its job? So this is how we get the Satan and the God motif. Then we get the Job part of this, where they decide to test Frost, who is this really advanced computer that oversees all of the Northern Hemisphere, all the work, and it works for Solcom, but sees all of the oversees the Northern Hemisphere. There's another machine that's called Beta Machine that controls the Southern Hemisphere. And this just seems to be very fertile myth for Roger Zelazny to try and retell in a scientific way, and it's really incredible, and it works really well. In fact, in my opinion, this works better in the long run than This Immortal and Lord of Light. And I know for a lot of people that will just be crazy to say, but I like this better than both of those. I feel like this has tighter prose, and it does what those others take hundreds and hundreds of pages. This one does in a little under 100. Really, really incredible prose and character development in this. Okay, from here on out, I will be spoiling this story. If you want to read this, it's a quick hour and a half read, maybe more, but not too much. It's a novelette. But yeah, if you want to read it, go give it a read and come back and you can see the end of this. Okay. So he makes a deal with a really old machine named Mordell, which is a demon whose name I'm sure is supposed to sound like mortal. But Mordell, it works for the Divcom, which is the Satan in this analogy. And he comes and tempts Frost with information on humanity, and this is the story of the kind of Faustian deal that Frost makes with Divcom. And the deal is that Divcom says, I can become human. Mordell says, no, you can't. It's impossible. You see everything through measurement. You're able to look at things and know everything about them. Humans can't know anything about an object but can feel it emotionally. There's no way that you can do that the way that humans do. And Frost says, yes, I can. They make this deal. And this is the story of Frost reading all the books that are left of humanity. And then he goes and visits the last area where the last humans lived before they all died off. And he meets or talks to Beta Machine. And Beta Machine's like, why are you in the Southern Hemisphere? You're not allowed to be here. This is my hemisphere. And eventually, because he just kind of went over there, Beta Machine starts talking to him, is like, why do you care about this human stuff? Why'd you go visit? So he starts sending all this stuff to Beta Machine. He also meets a robot called Ore Crusher. And Ore Crusher accidentally, there was one more human left just out in the world trying to survive, and Ore Crusher accidentally killed this human, and the heaven satellite, the god satellite, punished him by saying, okay, you have to just drive around the planet, and any robot you meet, you have to tell your story. You have to tell your story, and I'm not going to let you crush ore anymore. And he bends his hammer as a mark. Obviously, Cain and Abel. But of course, no matter how hard Frost tries to feel like a human, he can't do it. So eventually he comes up with the brilliant idea of finding frozen humans in the ice. So he searches and searches. Of course, he's just a big cube. He has all these robots that do this stuff for him. So he's searching and searching, and he eventually finds these humans that have been frozen, and he builds a factory that he takes cells from these humans and is cloning bodies, but the bodies don't have any existence inside of them. And eventually he figures out how to transfer his consciousness into this human, into a human body. And he's going to try to do this. And all the minions of Divcom, the Hell robot, all these minions from there, and then all these minions from the Heaven satellite show up. And there's this huge anticipation around this concept, and he transfers his consciousness into a body of a human, and he is absolutely terrified. It scares the heck out of him. And so he set it up so he'd only be in the human body for 5 minutes, and then his consciousness would go back to his cube body. And he comes back to his cube body and he's like, I failed, it was terrible, I can't be a human. And all the robots are like, wait a minute, you're feeling sad or afraid of being a human. And they said, that is a human emotion. And all the computers are like, shove him back in the body and make him get used to it. This is a human. So they shove his consciousness back into his body, and he slowly gets used to being a human, at which point he gets lonely. And so Beta Machine, who has been interested in his works for quite a while, he gets a hold of her and says, hey, do you want to be in a human body with me as well? And she says, absolutely. And we end with the concept of Adam and Eve. Really, really beautiful stuff. Also, I like the science fiction concept of humans creating machines that eventually create humans. It's a really interesting idea. I like this kind of loop to it. But I wanted to point out, and really this is important for the very end of this story, when he asks Beta Machine to be his Eve, that the title of this story is based on a poem by A.E. Housman called From Far, From Eve. And I'm just going to read this poem. It's not long. From far, from eve and morning, and yon 12-winded sky, the stuff of life to knit me blew hither, here am I. Now for a breath I tarry, nor yet disperse apart. Take my hand quick and tell me, what have you in your heart? Speak now and I will answer. How shall I help you say? Ere to the wind's 12 quarters, I take my endless away. So of course this story is named after a line in that poem. And the ending really considers that poem. So here we start with Frost talking. Now put me in contact with Beta. There was a short pause, then Frost. Hello Beta, hear this thing. From far, from eve and morning, and yon 12-winded sky, the stuff of life to knit me blew hither, here am I. I know it, said Beta. What is next then? Now, For a breath I tarry, nor yet disperse apart. Take my hand quick and tell me, what have you in your heart? Your pole is cold, said Frost, and I am lonely. I have no hands, said Beta. Would you like a couple? Yes, I would. Then come to me in bright Delphi, he said, where Judgment Day is not a thing that can be delayed for overlong. They called him Frost, they called her Beta. I love how he incorporates this poem directly into the lines that are spoken at the end there. It's really, really beautiful work, and this is the kind of stuff I've come to expect from Zelazny. And Zelazny is a complicated one for me because when I find stuff that really works for me by him, it just blows me away. But I find as he slowly goes to more action-oriented fantasy that I start to lose him a little bit. And I have not made it to Amber yet. I will get to the Amber Chronicles. And I know a lot of people swear by these, but I feel like in stuff like this, for A Breath I Tarry, for He Who Shapes or The Dream Master, Zelazny's firing on all cylinders and writing stuff that even arose for Ecclesiastes, I feel like is him hitting on all cylinders. There is something incredible at work at him during this time, and I feel like maybe it didn't go as well, and he found that as he slowly dipped towards these kind of epic fantasies that he started to make more money and felt like he had to go in that direction. I don't know. I'm eventually going to read all of his stuff, so we'll see what I think when I'm done with all that. But I will say this has been the best Zelazny read for me in a while. Absolutely incredible. I highly recommend this story. If you want mind-blowing science fiction, this is a quick one that is really worth it. All right. Thank you very much for watching this to the end. If you liked it, please click like. And if you like this kind of content, please click subscribe because I'll be making a lot more of it in the future. Thank you so much for watching.